Okay, well, I think we're still waiting for a few more people to join, but I think we'll start with the introduction anyway to our Zoom webinar, our Business Survivor's Guide to the Pandemic. Thanks so much for everyone who's joined so far, and particularly I want to thank the panelists who are all very busy. In fact, some of them are addressing Parliament, I think, later today. We'll get to that later on. But we have some really excellent content for you today, which I think you'll all find very valuable. And, as everybody knows, we're in some very interesting times. One of the themes that has been coming through loud and clear is how much community spirit we have. Um, all the people who have really taken this to heart in terms of social distancing, not just for ourselves, but for our neighbors, our community members, trying to keep everybody safe. And that's really the theme here. The community spirit aspect of what we're doing is today a little bit of information sharing, which is very important in terms of not only surviving the short term pandemic, but positioning ourselves to succeed in the recovery, which hopefully will be the second half of this year. And so we've got some excellent panelists here. We've got Kevin Halkyard joining us. We've got Kim Moody. We've got Sheila Musgrove, and this gentleman who's been running Shing Digital here in Alberta for close to 20 years. And he's a fellow who's got a real excellent talent for translating complex technical subjects into everyday language. And it's something that we need more of today. But more than anything, it's a field that, as you can imagine, IT in the last 20 years has been nothing but change. And certainly in terms of being able to adapt, there's no one better to speak to that subject than this gentleman, Mr. Cash Wong. Cash?
Good morning, everybody. Just give me 1 second here. I'm just, for some reason, my PowerPoint disappeared on me here.
I'll jump in here, Cash, while you get that sorted out, because
Sure.
one of the things that we've done, those of you who have been working with Shing Digital the last couple of years know that one of the things we like to do is lunch and learns and other events to share information and get a dialogue going with our customers. And this is a forum using webinar technology, Zoom in this case, that a lot more people are comfortable with these days, obviously. And so we think it's something that we're going to use more on a continual basis, the webinars with different themes, maybe on a quarterly basis, to keep connected with you guys who are both our customers and those of you who are just interested in the subject matter. And if you're good to go there, Cash, I'll turn it over to you.
I am. So thank you for that intro, Jeff. So just before I begin, so attendees, if any of you want to ask any of us questions, there's a Q&A button on the bottom of the Zoom window. You should be able to click on that and then sort of ask some questions. And then once we get to the end of the presentations, everybody can, all the panelists will sort of go through some questions and we'll start answering some of them for you. So as Jeff said, thank you for that intro, Jeff. I'm Cash. For those that don't know me, I'm the president and CEO of Shing Digital Inc. We are a managed IT and solution provider headquartered here in Calgary. And of course, my piece now I'm going to be talking about is kind of information technology. And if any of you have come to my lunch and learns or any of my talks, you usually know that I talk a lot about security and how we secure IT and the tools that we use. And I wouldn't say it's full of doom and gloom, but there's just usually a lot of, all the big bad things that can be out there. And I thought for this presentation that I'd sort of hold back on that a little bit because I think there's enough of that going on around without me adding to it. So today I kind of wanted to talk about, my team and my company and how we use technology as we're going through this pandemic. Now, you might think that as an IT company, it's pretty easy for us to transition from working from the office to at home. And, you'd probably be wrong. This is kind of what I felt like the first couple of days. The difference between choosing to work at home versus being forced to work at home are two very different scenarios. And so, it took me a couple of days, my computer and I weren't best friends for a couple of days there. But we've learned to adapt. Luckily I went to the office, grabbed some additional monitors and some additional tools to make sure that I'm set up properly to work from home. So, So my computer and I are probably, not as quite as zen as this guy, or my desk isn't quite as clean, but we've come to an agreement that we can work together, and I'm starting to get a lot more comfortable, and to be quite honest, I'm a lot more productive at home now. And some would say that I'm getting a little too comfortable working from home, right? So, but it's about getting the right tools to work wherever you are, and that's always been a big piece of what we do, is to give our staff and ourselves the technology to work from wherever we are. So, phones seem a little bit like old school now, but a lot of our customers, a lot of our partners, and a lot of our vendors still call us. So one of the things that we have in place is make sure that we have a VoIP phone system in place. This VoIP phone system allows us to take calls from our handsets at the office, but also soft phones that we have installed on our computers, our laptops, and even our smartphones. So we can take phone calls to one phone number from wherever we are and to answer them. And especially right now with my team scattered across the city working from home, this is even more important for our customers that still call in and want to talk to us. So we need to be able to communicate however they want to communicate with us. Now, we use a system called 3CX, but certainly there's a lot of other great systems out there. There's the Shaw hosted VoIP systems I'm sure a lot of people are on, the TELUS hosted systems, or you might be running your own Avaya IP Office system or Cisco. There's just a lot of options out there. But it's about being able to work from wherever you are, right? And communicate from wherever you are. Now, as a primary source of communication from within my team, we actually don't make phone calls to each other so much as we use Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft Teams is a central part to how, not only for us to work before this whole pandemic, but even more so now. Microsoft Teams allows my team to call each other, video call each other, but more importantly, it allows them to collaborate. So we have a lot of our files stored inside of Teams. When myself and the sales team are working on RFPs, we co-author the RFP documents that we use to send out. We store, even putting all of this town hall together, all of our PowerPoints, all of our documents, our invite lists are all shared from within Teams. We do one-on-one communications, we do group communication. This is also even where we do company addresses. So this way, as our folks are sort of scattered all over and we don't have that face-to-face interaction, Teams allows my team to stay in touch. And so this is a key part of anybody that has Microsoft Office. Now, we also use Teams to talk to some of our clients that also have Teams as well. And occasionally we also use Teams to do presentations to clients that don't have Teams. But we always like to use the tools that are specifically built for what they're supposed to be for. So when we're talking to clients that don't have Teams, or we're talking to vendors in which we need to do multiple presentations, we utilize the tools that make sense. As an example, we're using Zoom webinar today, and I know Zoom has had a lot of bad press lately. And if anybody wants to look, I've got an entire article on whether or not you should use Zoom. So it's a good read if you've got some time. But there's some great tools out there. Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, they're all purpose-built to allow you to stay in communication with your customer, no matter what tools everyone else has. So these are some great ways to stay in communication, especially during this pandemic. Now, in terms of how my team continues to stay productive with their internal tools, as an IT company, we always try to make use of the best technology that's out there. So we use a combination of software as a service tools, such as Microsoft Office and Teams, but we also have applications that we host inside of Microsoft Azure, and we also have applications that we self-host in our data center. And we choose where it goes according to, our internal guidelines of what data needs to live where and how we use it. Now, that being all said, with all of our tools and all of our software scattered all throughout the cloud, we tie them all back to a single authentication mechanism, which means that my staff don't have to remember multiple usernames and passwords to get into all of these separate tools. So otherwise you get to this password sprawl and people start writing passwords on sticky notes and sticking it all around your screen. So we try to avoid that by tying it all back into their main central authentication mechanism. And then, of course, to make sure that it's all safe, because we used to build high walls around our IT to make sure that all the bad guys from the outside can't get in. But now that all of our tools and all of our software is available wherever we are, we need another method in which to secure everything. Because even strong passwords can be stolen, weak passwords can be guessed. So we layer on something called multi-factor authentication on top of that, so that when our folks go and enter in their username and password, they also get a notification on their phone for them to confirm that yes, that is them that is logging in. So it's an extra step to make sure that the right people are logging into the right tools. And now, what's the purpose of everything that we've built, right? And the purpose is so that we can continue to communicate with our customers. We can communicate with our partners, right? I mean, we've already been doing this when things weren't crazy, and it's even more important now for us to make sure we maintain that level of communication. Even if you're, from a sales team perspective, even if you're not selling to customers today, you still need to continue on with that relationship, and what better time when everybody's stuck at home. Now, what does the future hold for us? Well, I would say none of us really know, right? Certainly the future has changed. I don't think any of us can even predict what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't even know when all this self-isolation is going to end. But some things that we know for certain, right? There's going to be a new normal. There's always a new normal after these events. So how do we adapt, and where do we go from here? Well, the first thing is going to be work at home, right? It's a genie in a bottle that's been let out, and there's no way we're putting it back in. Companies have, some companies have embraced it. A lot of companies have resisted it. But, after this whole pandemic, I don't think anybody's going to be able to say that people can't work from home anymore, because everybody's been doing it for, well, by the time we're done, it's going to be a good month to 2 months, if not more. So this is certainly something that we have to embrace. But with that, we also need to make sure that we have all the right tools. When we were sort of thrust into all of this, I would say a lot of companies, did with what they had, right, and to make it work. But as you come out of this, you have to make sure you think about the communication. If this is going to be a long-term strategy, it's going to be about how your folks stay productive, and how do you stay in communication with them to make sure that they continue to be productive, and how do they make sure they communicate with all of the customers. So make sure you're choosing the right tools for the right purposes. And along with that is also going to be software. Right now we've sort of cobbled together all of these different ways in which we can access our software. But as we come out of this, we have to start thinking about how do we take our traditional software and transition it to a way in which, we don't have to cobble solutions together to be able to deliver the software to all of our users, so that they can be as productive as they can be. And of course, like I said, I promised I wouldn't harp on it too much, but again, we have to make sure that we keep it all secure, right? The more accessible we make it, the more cognizant we have of having to also to make it secure, right? And again, the purpose of all this is to be able to deliver to our customers, to be able to deliver to our customers, faster communication. We have to be able to deliver products and services to them faster, but also how they want to consume it. Because certainly the way that we consume our products and services has changed today, right? And I don't see us sort of rolling the clock back and being able to make sure that everybody has to physically go to some place in order to get or consume a product or service. Thank you. I think my 10 minutes is up. I'm a little bit over, but thank you. My contact information is below, and I'm going to hand it back to Jeff.
That's great, Cash. Thank you so much. We've already got some questions coming in, and I want to give some more details as to what we're doing to reward some of these nice questions coming in, because we do have some giveaways for you. Starbucks coffee cards for the questions that come in. And also, we wanted to mention too, we're also going to be able to give away 2 copies of Sheila Musgrove's fantastic book, Hired, How to Get the Zippy Gig. And we'll have some more information on that later on. It's an awesome book. And I think we'll leave that to Sheila to describe how we're probably going to mail those out to a couple of folks. And but in terms of the question for Cash, one question came in, Cash, concerning the security aspects of Teams. How secure is Teams as a kind of a
So Teams is complete end-to-end encryption, unlike Zoom. So for internal meetings and more sensitive information, Teams is certainly a platform that you can trust. Microsoft has gone to great pains to make sure that that Teams is very secure for internal purposes. Microsoft has always been an enterprise platform, and so security is always top of mind for them. And so it's not something that they are lax on.
Great, yeah. And one of the themes you touched on there is really critical, and that is the different behaviors, consumer behaviors and business behaviors that this pandemic is driving that probably won't go away once the pandemic goes away. So that's an intriguing concept all on its own. So thanks for that. And we're going to go to our next panelist, Kevin Halkyard. And Kevin has 25 years of experience working with individuals and SMEs as an independent financial advisor with Navigator Wealth Management, Raymond Jones. And if you're good to go, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks very much. Appreciate that. Yes, as I say, you got it close there, Jeff. It's not Raymond Jones, it's Raymond James.
Raymond James.
No worries about that. I
Sorry
know. Yeah, never seen that one mixed up for me. But glad to be part of this today. Thanks very much for joining us and for having me as part of this today. I'm just going to get my screen set up here as well. So let's get this going here. So I hope that's up there for everybody now. Thought what better way to start the morning than a beautiful sunrise, because that's one of the things that will always happen is we'll always have a beautiful sunrise that will come up somewhere in this world, even in the midst of the wonderful pandemic that we're dealing with today. So my discussion today is going to chat briefly about some of the lessons we've seen from perhaps past pandemics, past periods of market volatility, and take a few minutes and chat about how you can integrate that within your personal and business plan. So, of course, there we go. Have to have disclaimers. This is my opinion, not necessarily that of Raymond James. And of course, this should not be construed as financial advice. Please talk to your planning professionals. They're the ones that are best able to help you today. So, bit of an agenda. As I mentioned, we're going to chat briefly about some of the history of the pandemics that we've seen, some of the recessions that have been out there. We're going to touch basically on the last 60-odd years. We're going to talk about some of the economic fallout from these periods, and great chart, bull and bear markets. As I mentioned, we're going to touch upon the planning strategies, personal and corporate, and hopefully we'll have a bit of time to chat briefly about some of these government programs as well. Great chart I borrowed from my friends over at Visual Capitalist. This is the last roughly 300 years or so of the main pandemics that have the world has seen. Many of these, quite frankly, most people don't even know existed, but it's interesting when you start looking at it. This chart was updated, there it is, April 7th. So a little over 78,000 deaths from COVID. I know it's going a little higher right now, but we're a long ways from some of the more recent ones, such as Spanish flu, HIV/AIDS, or even the Asian or Hong Kong flu from the 50s and the 60s as well. So how does that impact us as far as markets? Well, one of the things that we're finding is that over time, any type of an event, whether it be a pandemic, which has been rare to be the market impact that we see today, usually markets are impacted negatively from an event. Oil crisis would be a great one. Asset-backed paper from 08-09, currency. You know, those types of events are ones that typically we see happening with these bear markets. Now, I show the chart here because bear markets give us an idea that they are a short window in time. Average bear market is under a year. There are some that have gone longer than that, but those are more rare. Typically, you're going to see a bear market of about a year, maybe less. A bull market, we just came out of one. probably one of the longest ones in history. It was well over 10 years, which is a rarity. But as you can see from the chart, there is lots of ups and downs. The interesting thing of this chart, of course, is we had the investor start back in '56. I believe it was $1,000 that he had to start with. If he would have just forgot about his money, he would have had over $60,000. Pretty healthy return over that period of time. So what are some of the personal strategies that we should be looking at? Probably the biggest thing right now is pulling out your personal financial plan. How is the world impacting what you're doing today? And should you be looking at making some modifications to your plan? Remember, whenever you look at your plan or what you're trying to accomplish, make the changes on what's best for you, not what is being driven or dictated by the marketplace. Make sure that you act and don't react is probably the best way to put it. Best way I found that people can survive in periods of economic uncertainty is to review their cash flow. Cash flow, without it, you're dead in the water very quickly. So look at how you can reduce your unnecessary expenses. As a financial planner, everybody loves me when I talk to them about budgeting or emergency funds. Well, this is exactly why you have those discussions. What can you eliminate in your budget or reduce in your budget? What can you do to increase your cash flow or at least supplement some of the cash flow that may be lost? Access your emergency fund, line of credit, HELOC. Government benefits for those that maybe have lost their jobs or have slowed down as far as income. You know, there's employment insurance, CERB, of course. Some of the other ones they're trying to be creative with is a job sharing or work sharing program. So EI tops up part of your income. So again, lots of different sources out there that government's trying to help fill some holes. Defer some of your expenses if possible. I'll leave this to the accountants, but you can defer your tax payable now through, I believe it's June or September. No, business is June, personal is September. Too many dates. The government keeps changing everything on it, so hard to keep it all straight. A couple other things that I wanted to touch upon is as you're looking at those expenses, make sure you keep your hands off your insurance policies. Those are the things that I find a lot of people when I'm talking to, they think is one of the first things that should be reduced or cut. Those are the areas that it's probably best to leave well enough alone. They are there for emergencies. And if you actually have the right type of life insurance or a permanent type of a life insurance, it might actually help with some cash flow because there may be some available cash in there, or you can take loans or use it for collateral as well. I also get asked a lot about investment. One of my clients sent me a quip the other week, and he says, yeah, you know, Kevin, COVID is kind of, pardon me, let's get this straight again. Your RSPs are kind of like your nose in this period of time. Don't touch it. So I thought that was kind of a good way to put it. But again, adjust based on your needs. Look at things that there may be opportunities in the market. Rebalance your portfolio. Move into areas that make more sense in this part of the economic cycle. You know, again, discuss these points with your investment advisor and they'll be able to help with direction that's best for you. Business strategies, quite frankly, the business strategies are very much like the individual strategies. Difference here is pull out your business plan. I know your lawyer's probably harping with you about your business plan. Do you have one? You don't. How do you know where you're going? Look at what you can do within your business plan. Cash had a great point as far as technology. What can technology do to help you with today's circumstances? Reach out to your IT specialist. They can provide some advice and maybe some training on Zoom perhaps might be a great way to connect to your clientele. Again, adjust your plan based on your needs, not on the external events. You know, cash flow, again, reduce unnecessary expenses. You know, what do you have for savings? You might have to put some of your own money into your business to keep it going. Yes, there's going to be some tax implications there, positive. So again, talk to your accountant, figure out what's happening. The other good news is that a lot of business owners that are having a slowdown in income or not even paying themselves, they may even be qualified for the CERB benefit as well. And don't forget about the first government wage subsidy, the 10%. It's actually still out there. They've supplemented it with the 75%. $40,000 loans to business owners. Again, qualifications. I was reviewing this last night, and the government changed it again last night. Qualifications made it easier. Again, talk to your planning professionals. Same goes for the corporate type of insurances that you have and investments. Same comments from the personal as for business. So kind of summing up, what do we need to do? And as I was looking back on this, probably the most important thing right now is get back to basics. Manage your expenses. Assess and reassess our ability to have capital. Is it sufficient to get us through 3 or 6 months or longer? When we look at what we're in right now, we are in a bear market. We are not in a recession technically. We will be, I'm quite certain by the end of the year that we will have all the economists telling us that it is a recession, but they're always looking in the rearview mirror. Talk to your professionals that are around you. They helped you get running your business. They helped you get your things structured as far as your personal situation. Now is a great time to rely upon them as well. Accountants, lawyers, financial planners, IT specialists. These are the guys that are going to help you through this period of time. Again, don't do the knee-jerk reaction. Make changes based upon your own needs, not based upon what's going on around us. One of the things in one of my offices, I've got a number of health professionals around me. So the fourth point, look after your own health, mental and physical. I've been talking to one of the counselors. She can't believe the amount of people that are just overloaded mentally at this time. So get help if you need it. And probably the best thing I can tell you is remember this event will soon be part of the history books, and better times are going to return. We just have to be patient and make sure we stay focused on what we can impact and not get too caught up in the stuff that's around us that we have no control over. So thank you very much for your time. A couple of last thoughts. I had to put up the sidewalk chalk because my twins were out decorating our front sidewalk the other week, and amazing how many people we had stop when they were out for their walks in the neighborhood to enjoy it and put a smile on their faces. So wish everybody well, and we'll take some time to answer any questions. Go from there. Thank you very much.
That's great, Kevin. Thank you so much. And before I get to a question that's coming for you, I did want to mention, and this ties into one of your topics that you mentioned at the end, and that is the importance of mental and physical health. And one of our panelists today, which I forgot to mention earlier, Dorota Ulkowska, is going to be talking to us on the subject of mindfulness. And I'm looking forward to that very much. But thanks again, Kevin. Now, a question came in regarding, it's kind of an interesting way of putting it, but is there one kind of idea that your customers are coming to you with that you're finding that is very misplaced, like a common misperception of what should be a way to modify their investments or their portfolio in a way that's not a good move that you're seeing come up more often than not?
Can't say I really have that, but one comment that I guess I would have that I keep coming back to is most people are coming in and they're actually quite frankly scared to look at their statements or even ask how their investments are doing because they're looking at the markets. And the markets are, they say, 25, 30, 35%, whatever the case is. And they've got it in their mind that I'm also following exactly that. Most people, unfortunately, don't really review what their investments are and realize that they do have a diversified portfolio or should have. Mm-hmm. And the diversified portfolio often, I was chatting with one of my clients yesterday, they were going, oh, doom and gloom, down 25%. So I pull up their stats, they're off about 8%. And they go, 8%? I thought everything was down 30. Well, again, it's that they don't understand a lot of times or have taken the time to review what they have. So again, the media is that, but probably the biggest misconception is the returns that are out there in the marketplace compared to personal returns are really quite a disconnect.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, Kevin, thanks again. And our next panelist is a fellow who's the CEO and director of the CEO, director of Canadian Tax Advisory with Moody's Gartner Tax Law. And he's a fellow who's renowned for being able to take the complex tax code and translate it into language the rest of us can understand. And his primary area of expertise is tax and estate planning for owner-managers of private corporations and executives. And we're pleased to turn it over now to Mr. Kim Moody. Are you there, Kim?
Yes, I'm here. I had to take it off mute. My apologies.
No problem.
So how do I take control of this here, or should I just get Cash to maybe? You know what? Easier. Let's rock and roll here. So, Cash, do you want to just advance to the next slide, please?
Sure.
So thanks for that kind introduction. So my personal expertise is tax and estate planning for the high net worth private client. And I can tell you, in the last month dealing with the COVID crisis, it's been, as the old saying goes, drinking from a fire hose. And so there's no shortage of stuff to talk about. But I think the first question is, how do we survive? We being business owners, which is my area of expertise, dealing with private business owners. Before I move through my PowerPoint slides here real quick, I just will point out that the filing deadlines that were mentioned, and no surprise that there's a lot of confusion on this, but the personal income tax filing deadline in Canada has been extended to June 1st. The trust filing deadlines and partnership filing deadlines has been extended to May 1st. And then the tax remittances have been extended to September 1st, with GST remittances and HST being June 30th. So it's a bit of a handful to keep in your head, but those are the actual filing deadlines. So the question, how do we survive? Well, and some of this was mentioned already, from a tax and business perspective, protect revenues if you can. In some businesses like restaurants, there's, some of them just can't, or they rely on takeout. And I'll talk more about that later. Cut excess costs immediately. And of course, that's easier said than done because most business owners are typically pretty good at managing their costs. So the question becomes, what are excess? What do you need? I find, and I'll be interested in hearing what Dorota has to say later, but panic and fear are not healthy. I mean, frankly, there's nothing good about panic and fear. There's just no positive aspects about that whatsoever. And so instead, provide calm and rational leadership for your team, obviously, your business, for your family, for your customers. Nothing worse than panicked so-called leadership. It's just, there's nothing good about it. This is the time, in my view, for transparent, positive, and honest leadership. There's no shortage of leadership books out there. I devour a lot of them. I have my own leadership style. I tend to, for me, I'm a rather blunt guy. Yeah, you'll usually know where I stand. Some people like that, some people don't. I really don't care. And so, but at the end of the day, you're certainly going to know where I stand. So, in any event, transparency, I think, is extremely important. Positive, but not fake positiveness. In other words, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. That kind of fake leadership and fake sentiment is not appreciated. Plan for the next 60 to 90 days as business is not as usual. I think that goes without saying, but take it in short chunks. What do you need to do to get to the other side? What I've told our team, for example, is that I think June 1st is a logical time where we're going to see the economy starting to come back. Maybe I'm wrong, but you know what? Psychologically, I provided our team with some light at the end of the tunnel so that if we can get through this next 60 to 90 days and come up with a to-do list, become quite familiar with any and all government relief programs. No shortage of information that's out there. Most accounting firms, law firms are trying to inform their clients, which is great. But when this information is coming to you, like a fire hose, it's really difficult to parse through what is true and what's not. And I can tell you, media is not your friend when it comes to educating yourself on the government programs. I am inundated with emails and phone calls about Globe and Mail articles or National Post articles that are just flat out wrong. So, that, pick some trusted sources and go with it. Be careful about taking on too much debt, because obviously it needs to be repaid one day. Do you need to lay off employees? Be careful about doing that on your own. We thankfully have, in our firm, for example, great employment lawyers at our ready, and they've been busy. So seek competent legal advice. Next slide, please, Cash. So how do we adapt? Well, from a tax and business perspective, like I said, become familiar with any and all tax, GST, HST, or other remittance deferrals, and take advantage of it. And again, there's no shortage of misinformation about what these deadlines are. And so become very familiar with them and diarize it using your phone or whatever. Adjust your cash flow projections to take into account these deferrals. Oh, wait a minute, you don't do cash flow projections? What, are you kidding me? You got to do it now. I don't care if you're a one-man band or, WestJet or Air Canada. You've got to do cash flow projections. Cash is king. And you need to reach out to your clients proactively. Talking about a good story, Vero Restaurant in Calgary. Some of you might be familiar with Vero. I like it. It's a great restaurant. And all of a sudden, when the crisis started, I got email drips from them about Vero takeaway. And I thought, man, that's interesting. So I look at their menu, and, last week, getting sick and tired of eating at home. So I told my wife to put pretend that we're going out. So get all the nice cutlery and the plates and the nice bottle of wine. I'm going to get Vero takeaway. And so I did that. I couldn't believe it. There's cars lined out their restaurant with a steady stream of people coming out delivering to the cars. Now, I don't know what the revenues are like, but I got to tell you, that's a nice little success story of adaptation that I thought was just awesome. And so I continue to follow them. Get creative. Obviously, Vero has. Are your easiest source of new revenue staring at us? For us, for example, in our firm, we've used this time, because of course the business is shut down, the business community is shut down, to look at all of our old clients. And we're almost done that. It's taken about 2 weeks for us to go through. What? I mean, I don't have to do any external marketing for the rest of my life because we're sitting on a gold mine. And so that was a nice little revelation. And frankly, we should have done this pre-crisis. What about you? Next slide, please. And this is the last thing. So what should or could you do to get ready for post-crisis? Well, obviously you need to first survive as a business owner. But what you need to do, what do you need to do to get ready when the economy reopens? Is it easy as turning the switch back on? Thankfully, there's some articles in so-called mainstream media that are actually addressing that. There's no shortage of non-business people that think you can just simply turn the switch back on. Sorry, that shows an absolute asinine understanding of business. And because, for example, restaurants, if they all of a sudden turn their lights back on, what are they going to have to do? Probably talk to their landlords, make sure that they get some rent deferrals, get their inventory of food back up, which is very expensive. Probably clean the hell out of their places, et cetera, et cetera. So how, it comes up, reopening and expansion come with significant costs. How will you pay? How will you repay new debt? Debt is usually not your friend in many cases like this. What does your cash flow projection say? You mean you haven't done it? Do it. And it's time for reevaluation. Look at this as a time for reevaluation. Has your legal structure served you well during this crisis, or is it time for reevaluation? There's one client that we have that had commingled a whole bunch of their cash cow assets with some bad assets. Not good during a time like this. And so, of course, this person will get through, but it's time to reevaluate. How can you, are you going to have tax losses? How can you use them to help with your cash flow? But ultimately, what do you want your business to look like post-crisis? What can you do to get ready for that now? And the short answer is get ready now. So with that, that's my presentation. Thanks, everyone, and happy to take questions later or whenever.
Thanks so much, Kim. And I think we will hold off on the questions for now, just to make sure we have enough time for both Sheila and Dorota. But I really appreciated what you were saying, particularly about being skeptical. What we hear in the media and what we're hearing just in the general buzz around town. We have to verify everything that's being said out there, and try not to sugarcoat how difficult things are right now, but at the same time, keep our eyes open for the opportunities. So thanks so much for that, Kim.
Pleasure.
And our next panelist is the author of a wonderful book called Hired, How to Get the Zippy Gig. She's also the founder and CEO of Tag Recruitment, an organization that's been in existence for 15 years. And she's a good friend of ours at Shing Digital, and we're happy to have her. It's Sheila Musgrove. Sheila.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, delighted to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'm going to use my 10 minutes to talk about my second book, which is called Unexpected Mentors, Weird and Creative Ideas to Boost Your Career, because I think we can all use a little bit of a boost during this really interesting time. So mine is a little bit more of a creative boost for you this morning. So I want to share with you, the first time I was invited to do a keynote on mentors several years ago, after I agreed to do the keynote, I kind of panicked because I thought, well, shoot, I've actually never had a formal career mentor. So what on earth am I going to talk about? Well, I laughed when this image popped to mind. Peter Lehman's Mentor Red Wine. I thought, yeah, sure. I can talk about the virtues of a lovely red wine and how red wine has shaped my career over the years. And I did get permission from the winery to use this image in my book. So in Unexpected Mentors, I take the idea of a traditional mentor-mentee relationship and turn it upside down. And I came up with 18 weird and creative ideas to boost your career. And most often, I would guess that when you read those 18, that they are likely unexpected. They are likely ones that you've overlooked, undervalued, or never thought of as potential career boosters. So I'm going to share 2 with you this morning. So a single moment can actually provide you with incredible career or business mentorship. Here was mine. Several years ago, I was attending a conference, and the keynote speaker gave me that mentor moment. What he said was, be bold in your asks, in your daily asks. Now, we're all in business and in sales, so we ask for things every single day. And so I thought, okay, well, that's not that all insightful, until he said, ask for things you fully expect to get a no to. And I thought, well, that's interesting. That sounds a bit like a dare and a little bit of fun. So I tucked that in the back of my head. So I started writing my first book, Hired, in the fall of 2015. And of course, anyone in Alberta knows that was the first year of the recession. So of course, when I'm doing business development for TAG, no one really wants to meet with a recruiter in the middle of a recession when you're laying off people. So I thought, I need to be a little bit more creative. So I thought, I need to be bold and just ask those people on my target list, those executives, let's not talk about staffing. Rather, I reached out to countless executives and said, hey, I'm writing a book. Could I quote you on your favorite interview question, what you'd like to see more from candidates, and best end of interview question? And of course, loads and loads of people didn't reply, which was a no. But the really cool thing, I did get interviews from 14 Canadian executives, including ATB's chief economist. Todd Hirsch talked about some of his really interesting, fun interviews, lovely material. I interviewed CBC former radio host of Jazz Tonic and jazz musician and recording artist Tim Tamashiro. My ask to Tim was, what do you do to prepare to go on national radio or walk out on stage or do a performance? So Tim's response was interesting. It was a fun one. He said, I read an article years ago that said, if you envision smelling a brand new box of Crayola wax crayons before you go into a big meeting or an interview or an event, it lowers your blood pressure. So I haven't tried it yet, but now, you know what, thinking of it, I think we should all go zip onto Amazon this afternoon and order a brand new box of Crayola wax crayons to see if it works. This handsome cat, his name is Corey Warren. Corey is a TSN golf sports announcer. And I asked the same question to Corey. What do you do before going on national television and interviewing people like Tiger Woods? Well, we did go down that road, but the funnier part of the story that he shared with me was that he was at the Masters in Augusta, and their temporary TV set actually fell apart, and it fell on his head. Not funny, he was okay. So he said, as a professional, the show has to go on. So he went on live television, slightly concussed, but made it through. And then I was driving to work one morning and heard these two cats on the radio. This is E! Network's The Style Guys, Jason and Ali. And again, be bold and just ask. I reached out to Jason and Ali and said, hey, I'm also a Calgarian. I'm writing a book. Could I interview you on my chapter on dressing sharp? And they agreed, which was really, really fun. Now, so this was my practice run of being bold and just asking. So what I'm going to do, here's where I want you to go with be bold and just ask. This is the kind of bold I want you to be talking about while we've got some time. While we've got some time, that's the kind of bold I want you to do. And since publishing my book, I've had a few, so I'm going to share those with you. I think Hired, my first book, Hired, How to Get the Zippy Gig, it needs to be in Hallmark throughout North America. Hallmark, when you have a loved one that graduates from high school, college, university, of course you go to Hallmark to buy a graduation card. And of course there's always little gifts there that you can buy for your loved one. Well, what better gift than a book that's going to show your loved one how to actually get a job? So I wrote a letter to Global Procurement in Kansas City for Hallmark, suggesting exactly that. They need to have my book in their stores. Did the same for Canada. Then I found the European executives for Hallmark are located in the Netherlands. Well, I don't speak Dutch. So I went on to a cool platform called Fiverr, and for $20, I had my letter converted to Dutch, translated to Dutch, so sent off those letters. So in 1 or 2 or 5 years from now, when you walk into Hallmark during graduation season and you see a copy of Hired on the table, that will be a reminder to you. Remember, be bold in your asks. It will happen. Now imagine, how many of Ellen DeGeneres' viewers do you think need solid resume and interview advice? I'm guessing probably quite a few. So I wrote a letter to Ellen, and I must say, actually, it is quite funny, as you would expect it should be when writing to Ellen. My ask to Ellen was, again, to get my book in front of her audience, sent along a copy. I then found 8 of her producers, also from the same studio, sent them the same letter and book. So there's now 9 copies of Hired floating around the Ellen DeGeneres studio in Burbank, California. You never know unless you ask. I'm wearing these fabulous red shoes on the cover of Hired. They're a Guess shoe, shiny red, steel toe, and I love these shoes. I have them in black, red, bone, snake skin, alligator skin, and gold glitter. You get it. I love these shoes and I need them. Discontinued. I can't believe they're discontinued. So my letter to the CEO of Guess was this: keep me in supply of these amazing shoes, all colors, of course, and from every stage that I stand on, I'll give a shout out to Guess. Be bold and just ask. Now, here's my latest. I'm simmering on writing version 2 of Hired. Hired is actually 4 years old already. So I need to write version 2. So I thought I might need some advice or insight. So when I think of the Canadian book that has stood the test of time. It's David Chilton's Wealthy Barber. He wrote this book in 1989, 31 years ago, and it's still as relevant today as it was in 1989. So one evening I thought, I need to write to Dave Chilton. So I pulled up his website. His email address was very easy to find, and I wrote him an email. I explained who I was. I'm a Calgary-based recruiter. I'm regularly interviewed on CTV as a job and resume expert. I've authored 2 books, and I'd like some insight. Number 1, my first ask, ask to Dave Chilton, could I quote you in my second version of Hired? My second ask to David Chilton was, might you have a nugget of wisdom to give to the fellow author on how to keep your book relevant for so many years? So I closed off that email that night. I thought I'll take a look at it again in the morning and see if I still like it. Opened my laptop, read the email again. Yeah, it made me smile. So I hit send and went about my day. But here's what happened. About 10 minutes later, my phone rang. And here's how that conversation went. Hey, Sheila, it's Dave Chilton. So I smiled and said, well, hello, Dave. And Dave very quickly declined my request to be interviewed in the next version of Hired. However, he did say, I just looked at both of your books on Amazon. In particular, Unexpected Mentors. You should be able to sell hundreds of thousands of copies of your book into corporate North America. He said, think of how many organizations have conferences where all of the organization is brought into a city to come together. Companies are always looking for gifts for their employees that also help to inspire productivity and so on. He said, I think your book does that. So in the next 7 minutes, we talked about some other ideas on how to get Unexpected Mentors into the hands of those hundreds of thousands of people. So we then ended our conversation. And then, of course, I just share with my team that the Dave that I was on the phone with was Dave Chilton. I then ran back to my office and pulled up and started writing a blog. And I've been publishing a blog for 4 years. So I had to write about my experience of sending an email and actually having a cool conversation with none other than the wealthy barber himself, Dave Chilton. I published that blog a week later, and of course I sent it to him, and I did get another reply, and he just said, keep going. So back to you. Where can you be this kind of bold in your asks for your career and your business? We've all got a little bit of extra time. Use this time now to be really, really creative with your business. And happy to take any questions. And here's all my contacts if you'd like to be in touch. Back to you, Jeff.
That's great. Thank you, Sheila. And I'm sure there's going to be some questions coming in. We'll get to them right at the end of the presentation. And, you mentioned being bold and creative. I think that's kind of a theme that's developing here, is that the creativity piece is, in everything that we're being challenged with, there still are opportunities, and we should approach them with that kind of mindset of being bold and creative. And anyway, thanks so much. And I'm glad you touched on your latest book, which I want to get a copy of, autographed, I hope.
Well, sure. I'm just down the hallway.
So thanks again for all that. And the other theme that's emerging here too is, the other aspect of our talk today, wellness and just being healthy, both in mind and body. And to wrap up our chat today, we have someone who's got quite a bit of experience in that area. She's been with Shing Digital for several months now. And one of the reasons why we were so pleased to have her on board was just her general positivity and the energy she brings to her work every single day. And getting to know some of her background, I'm starting to realize where some of that is coming from, because for a while she was running her own company that was called Mind Intermission. And it taught a lot of things, mostly along the lines of the importance of mindfulness. And we're going to turn it over to her right now, Dorota Ulkowska. Are you on mute there, Dorota?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. I am unmuted now. Hi, everybody. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Jeff. I really appreciate it. So let me talk about mindfulness during the quarantine, which might sound like an impossible task, but I have been already sharing some of my suggestions to my coworkers, and it seems to be working. So give you a few. So we are all going through a bit stir crazy, working from home. Further to that, as we heard from other panelists, we have intense stresses coming from the unknown, such as the economy, how will our company get through this time, our health, our family, friends, and more. So the following slides are going to be just a few nuggets, as I mentioned, that you can incorporate right away to help you reduce your stress on a daily basis. Sorry, let me see here. I'm not sure. Here we go. This following slide gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're going towards here. We want to be more like the dog in this slide. So as you can see, the human being is really the typical person, right? Thinking about what's happening in the world, the news that is really spreading a lot of fear and really a lot of doubt as to what is true, what is not. And frankly, our concern about how we and our family and our loved ones are going to survive. The dog, however, is very much in the present moment, just having a lovely walk. So goal here, we want to be more like the dog. So the next, the next slide is the first thing that I want to talk about is the location of your home office. We're all working from your home office, from our home offices. So where exactly is your office located? The area where we are really impacts our happiness levels and how motivated we are to work. Your mood will impact how you see each situation, whether it is an opportunity for change or just another stressful problem, right? So if, for instance, your office is in the basement, which a lot of individuals have put their offices in the basement, is there enough light? Are you in the basement along with all of the other stored things? Are you in the living room or the kitchen? Is the TV on in the background? Are the kids jumping all over you? Are you constantly interrupted? If that is the case, then my suggestion is create a space for yourself that you actually enjoy being in, that's separate from the craziness of everything else that's going on. I, for instance, had my office in the basement. It was way too dark, so I moved everything up to the spare bedroom. I can close the door. I have the light. I have a nice window painting in the background. It makes me feel good being in this space, and it definitely elevates my mood. So that is a suggestion. Another pointer that I will make is those individuals who are in a situation where they have small children and a partner who's working. The question is, how do you both work and look after your kids? The suggestion is schedule it. Schedule the time between your partner and you. Which one of you is going to be looking after the kids for the hour? Which one is going to be working in your Zen space? If you can do that, that would be the suggestion. And of course, I know that not everybody can do that. The next thing that I want to talk to you about is light, which is very important. And before I go there, I actually want to talk about two hormones, which I'm sure all of you guys are very familiar with, but I just want to remind you there are two hormones that we generate in our own bodies. There is melatonin, which is a hormone secreted during the darkness, and it helps you sleep, basically. It helps you relax and fall asleep. Serotonin is a hormone which is actually increased during sunlight, and it creates happiness, and actually it reduces a lot of your stress. So for those individuals, for instance, who are depressed, they take medications to increase their serotonin level because they're not making enough serotonin in their bloodstream. So those are two very, very key hormones. So why am I talking about this? There is a measurement of light called lux. The outdoor light level is approximately 10,000 lux on a clear day, 2,000 on a cloudy day. If you're inside the house, by the window, it's 1,000 lux. And in the middle of the house, it's about 25 to 50 lux. In a basement, definitely as low as 25, if not even lower. So the conclusion, be aware of how much light you are getting throughout the day. If you are sitting in a dark basement, chances are very high you are not getting enough serotonin, and you're going to start feeling sad, and you're going to start to feel hopeless about things. So what is my suggestion? I'm going to sound like a mommy, which I am, and that is go for a walk. And I'm not talking about going for a walk at the end of the day. Take a break at around noon if possible, or if you have just a little bit of time in between meetings. 10 minutes is enough actually to start generating the serotonin from sunlight. Now I understand that the weather hasn't been the best in Alberta. I understand in Edmonton, especially, it is quite brutal right now still, but bundle up, go for a 10-minute walk. It will wake you up. It reduces the melatonin, increases the serotonin, and it will bring you back into the present moment. It's quite interesting, you know, when you hear those birds and you realize, oh yes, there is actually a beautiful world out here, and you get back into your meetings, you have a very different perception of life. The next pointer that I will speak to is putting your work away. This is something that I've actually spoken to Cash about multiple times because he seems to be a victim of this. The individuals who are not used to working from home are finding that they are just so much more productive as they can work all the time, 24/7. The work is always there. So if you are in the evening sitting with your family and you have an idea about that business issue, you can go back to work and finish it. But at a price. It impacts your sleep. It actually has a price of not being present with your family, and it does increase your stress level. So what can we do? Here is my suggestion, and this is the suggestion that I gave to Cash. Put your work away. At the end of your workday, keep to the same schedule that you had when you were actually out in the real world and not your home office. So if you worked till 5 p.m. or till 6 p.m., make that your schedule. So close the door to your office. Put your work phone away. If you don't have a work phone, you have everything on your home phone, just do a practice of checking your work email. If you are on call, I know a few people who are executives and they need to be on call just in case there are COVID emergencies. Check your phone maybe once an hour or the maximum amount allotted for checking your phone. Just say no to that meeting after hours. Honor that schedule for yourself, because what you are doing actually is you are recuperating so that you can be fully on the next day. All right, the next slide is, whoopsie, I'm going to go back here, is trying something new. So I'm actually going to talk about the brain a little bit again. The cerebral cortex of the brain is responsible for higher thought processes, and the left hemisphere is the rational half associated with analytical thinking. Clearly, my rational half was not working there. And this is what we use during our workday. This is being definitely overworked. The frontal cortex and the right side of the brain are responsible for creativity. Now, trying new things in order to entertain yourself and your family not only create closer bonds with loved ones, but also give your brain some balance. Therefore, giving you your analytical brain a chance to take a break. So what are some suggestions? I have a friend who actually, I think it's a fantastic idea. With his kids, he has like a contest every single day. Who can do most push-ups, right? Or who can do most pull-ups? Or who can run the furthest in 30 seconds or whatever else. So it's a physical activity. It is creative. I know other people who have actually started writing books. not talking about you, Sheila, but yes, a lot of people have started writing, learning new instruments and languages. Another friend of mine said, you know, Shakespeare wrote King Lear during the pandemic. Don't waste this virus. Do something creative. And the last item that I want to talk to you about is sleep. And if you get anything out of the slides at all, I hope you get something out of this one. We restore our bodies and minds when we sleep. If our sleep pattern is interrupted, we cannot completely recuperate, which impacts our emotional, psychological, and physical state the next day. A lot of people unfortunately spend time on screens right before bedtime, which is literally the worst thing you can do for two reasons. First of all, the light from the screens actually impacts the build of melatonin, and therefore it's harder to fall asleep. But the second thing is a lot of social media and news create a lot of fear. And this is to the point that Kim actually made earlier. Social media and the news do not necessarily get everything right. And we are living in a society that is really focused on fear. It is very, very hard to fall asleep when you are trying to process all of this negative information that you have just been exposed to. So no screens, and this includes televisions, 1 hour before bedtime. The second point is keep to the same bedtime schedule. So if while you were working in the office, you would go to bed at 10 and wake up at 6, keep to the same schedule. The body loves routine. So get back into that, and that allows you actually to have enough time to have a good night's sleep. So that is it for my presentation. You can get a hold of me at the following contact or through LinkedIn. And if there are any questions, I would love to answer them as well. So over to you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Dorota. Wonderful
You are very welcome.
presentation. And I actually learned a lot. And, one of the takeaways for me from hearing you and your subject matter is that we're also focused on staying safe from the COVID virus, that we're forgetting about the other aspects of our personal wellness. And your presentation has brought that into focus for me anyway. So thanks again. And now we're going to jump into one or two questions, but let me remind everybody that we have a few more minutes left here. So please type in your questions. You'll see at the bottom of the screen, there's the Q&A tab to click on and get some questions in before we're done today. We have some Starbucks cards for all your wonderful questions. And I just wanted to get to a question right now, if you don't mind. Sheila, this one's for you. I'll just read it for you. It came in the last couple of minutes. It says, I've been getting resumes and connection requests ad nauseum via LinkedIn from people who have obviously put their personal information into a basic resume template. Some of these people are friends, and I'd like to give them some advice on making a better resume. What approach should people be taking when they are now one of a million out of work?
Sure. Oh, that's a great question. The short answer would be they need to get a copy of my first book, Hired, How to Get the Zippy Gig, Insider Secrets from a Top Recruiter. I'm being a bit silly, but also serious to say, most people make, and I did a CTV interview 2 weeks ago precisely about this, the biggest resume mistake people make is filling their resume, one, using a template, as you said, but two, filling their resume with 2 to 3 pages of bullets that describe functional responsibilities. Everyone does that version of a resume, and it's the biggest mistake ever. Hiring managers, particularly coming out of this, as you're already seeing, there's a significant number of people on the market, and a resume that is filled with 2 to 3 pages of bullets isn't going to cut it. It is not going to cut it. I used a stat in my book, 80% of resumes are rejected within 11 seconds. So that's all the time that you get at first glance. Rather, the 2-step resume formula that I wrote about, I won't have time to go through it, but it's focusing on key results and successes. Everyone, of course, remembers the old days of behavioral-based interviews, which were the tell me about a time questions. No one liked it, and most people really didn't do a great job at responding to them. So rather, fill your resume rather than functional bullets, fill it with results. Percentages rankings that share exactly how well you've performed in your previous position. Ultimately, a hiring manager is hiring how well you performed in the past, not your functional responsibilities. I hope that answers a little bit. I'll also be doing a webinar in a couple of weeks specifically for job seekers. So if you subscribe to my blog, I'll be putting the dates of the webinar in there as well.
That's great. Thanks so much, Sheila. And we also have a question for Cash. Cash, we have a client who was thoroughly hacked last June. She hired an IT specialist who she thought was solving the situation and making her secure. Unfortunately, it is not yet solved. Is this something your firm could help with?
Oh, absolutely. The thing about being hacked is that it's not cut and dry. Once they're into your network, they could be, just like viruses, these things can be hiding anywhere, right? Just solving the surface level of some of the problems sometimes doesn't get to root of actually getting the hacks or the viruses and the ransomware out of the system. And a lot of the viruses and hackers these days are a lot smarter. They know that you're going to go after and clean certain things. But if you're not being thorough and if you're not going through every system, and security is a constant, pervasive process. It's not a come in, sweep it away, and it goes away. It's got to become a state of mind.
Absolutely. Our next question, maybe best for Kim, is we are a small oil field support services company deemed essential for oil tools support. Our partnership is made up of 3 incorporated companies. However, our companies are trusts to include our spouses. According to what I have read, the federal government is offering support to partnerships made up of individuals only. This seems a bit prejudiced against trusts. Therefore, my question is, should we convert our company to a corporation? Is this a limiting factor? Kim, would you like to address that?
Sure. I started answering and I realized I was on mute. The short answer is I believe the person is looking at the first version of the wage subsidy rules, which is the so-called 10%. There's 2 wage subsidies. There's the 10%, which is now law, got passed under Bill C-13, and then there's the so-called 75% wage subsidy. The partnership prohibition that he's talking about with trusts is the one that exists in the 10% subsidy. And so the information that the person received about bias against trusts is correct as it relates to the 10% wage subsidy. But the real meat is, do you qualify for the 75%? And I can tell you that there's no draft legislation out yet to the public for us to address that question. I expect it will likely be released in the next day, probably by the end of today. And so I don't have a great answer, but certainly from what I know today, that employer partnership very well might qualify.
Okay, great. And this individual had a second part of the question, actually maybe even a separate question.
Should I set up a billing code?
Yeah. Here it goes. If our incorporated companies operate in parallel with a partnership and both are in distress, can we file for both the partnership and the limited company, or split the financial support between the companies?
Yeah, I'm not going to address that question until I would see the exact legal structure, because the devil's in the details. And,
yeah.
And I don't want to say yes. I don't want to say no, because the answer is I really need to understand more. And in particular, I need to see the draft legislation of the 75% to address that. So sorry, I can't do that.
No, that's totally fair. Now, here's this person's last question, okay?
I should have set up a code.
You betcha. Would we then be entitled to hire a government-subsidized student this summer, in reference to his first question?
That's a great question. The Prime Minister made some hints about funding temporary employment over the summer. I think he made that yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, or it might have been the day before. I'm kind of losing track of time here, but the short answer is don't know. Haven't seen the details. I mean, there is no shortage of questions with a very short list of answers right now, unfortunately. Yeah. Which is one of the problems with these rules coming out. Get us some detail, get us some certainty, and unfortunately, we're not being provided with it right now, which is disappointing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks so much, Kim. And um, we have a number of questions for Cash, which I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them. But Cash, how would you rank Zoom versus WebEx versus GoToMeeting?
Well, I mean, they're all great tools, but always be wary of what the tools provide and the meat behind the tools. You know, I've I've got a I've got a good breakdown in terms of all the risks of Zoom, but you know, probably one of the best things Zoom has going for them is that they're probably the easiest and best laid out for users that you know aren't quite as technical. That being said, if I had to rank them from a security perspective, GoToMeeting would be top, followed by WebEx, and then a distant third would be Zoom, right? So certainly we use it, but you know which tools you're using, know when to use it, know why you're using it. Don't just use it because it's a fad.
Mm-hmm. And here's another question for you, Cash. What about VPNs? That's the question.
It depends on, again, it depends on the company and how they use it and how they access their applications. We certainly use a combination of everything, right? And I would say a lot of our customers are as well. It depends really today how you're delivering your applications and how your folks work. Now, I would say that the good majority of our clients have a VPN set up because they have certain applications and certain data that they simply can't move onto the cloud, or that they can't simply move onto you know, some sort of web delivered application today, right? Well, especially not today. So you know, VPNs are still important, but again, make sure you're doing VPNs right. There's always a right way and a wrong way to do things, right? And usually the easy path is the wrong way.
Well, you know, related to that last point you made, here's another question for you. Should I allow my staff to use their home computers for work purposes?
This is always a sticky one. And the reason being is because, you know, roughly, I think 30% of all personal computers on there have been compromised in one way or another from some sort of virus or malware. So certainly you can, but, you know, make sure that ground rules are followed in terms of when you're letting your staff use personal computers to access corporate information, right? You know, the extra layers of security that like the multi-factor that we put in are supremely important when you're allowing your staff to use their personal computers. I mean, if you want better security, obviously, you know, giving out your own corporate laptops for folks to use is you know, by far the number one choice. You know, in this case of this pandemic that we're in, that's not always a choice. And even if you wanted to buy laptops for your staff, that's, I tell you, it's pretty tough right now, right? There's not a lot out there. You know, we're even having problems finding monitors for our customers, let alone laptops. So, you know, if you are forced into the situation, make sure that your staff have proper antivirus or anti-malware at home. Don't use the free stuff, please. I beg you, right? So make sure you get a good antivirus, make sure that it's scanned, and make sure that it's not a shared computer, right? Sometimes we only have one computer at home and it's shared amongst the kids and everyone else as well. So make sure it's a computer that's set aside at least just for you.
Sounds good. And we're going to get you to work some more for us, Cash, here with this next question. If we can expect permanent change in our working practice once we emerge from the pandemic, such that more will work from home, what do providers need to do to improve bandwidth? It's not very satisfactory right now.
So I will say, at least out west, I know we've got some folks joining us from the east as well, but certainly the amount of bandwidth available to us at home and at the office has increased significantly, right? And the prices have also fallen significantly as well, right? If we can even compare to a few years ago, like, you know, a 100 meg connection bi-directional for an office used to cost probably in the range of, you know, $2,000 to $2,500 a month. Well, I think you can get that from TELUS for like $110 or $120 right now. So certainly invest in things like that. Some folks certainly that are out in more rural areas that don't have access to some like the new TELUS fiber or some of the new faster Shaw services. they're depending on your jurisdiction, there are providers out there to certainly help you with some of those, and most of those are wireless. But certainly inside of the big cities, there's no reason why, as a business, we shouldn't be investing. Literally, it's a few more dollars. We're not talking thousands of dollars. We're talking tens of dollars to get a bigger connection for our offices so that we can deliver better services to our own staff. Right? And certainly from a home perspective, same kind of thing as well. I have a 600 meg connection from Shaw now that I think I'm paying something like $75 a month for. Right, a few years ago, that was unheard of. That would have been like a second mortgage. So there's really not a lot of excuses not for a lot of organizations not to be able to deliver those type of service levels to their own staff.
And here's another question for you, Cash. Is there a significant difference in security between Windows and Mac computers?
So full disclosure, I'm not a Mac guy. They're from a if you're in oil and gas, I would say it doesn't exclusively exclude you from using Macs, but certainly a lot of the applications that are used in the oil and gas sector were designed to run on Windows. But it really depends on the industry that you're in. If you're in a lot of more of the general industries, like I wouldn't even say accounting. Some accounting applications only run on Windows as well. But if you're in creating media, if you're creating intellectual property such as writing books or articles, Macs are certainly great for those kind of things. And there is a way for us to run Windows on Mac to show you my bias. Right? But certainly pick and choose the right tools that are right for your organization.
Sounds good. And in the last few minutes we have remaining, we'll have a few more questions. This one's for Kevin. Kevin, what signs will be an indicator of a recovery and time to get back into more stocks versus bonds? And second part of the question is, do you see oil and gas companies or service companies as a good buy, given their huge drops, but large market cap and potential for future earnings when oil rebounds?
Oh, a couple of great questions there. First one, I wish I had the answer to. Because again, at the end of the day, it's trying to time the market to be in and out at the right time. Indicators, probably some of the best things, just as general economic indicators, are going to be increased employment. Once we see that, that's going to be typically the start of probably our next business cycle. Hopefully that will not be too long, but I think Kim mentioned there was 1 million people that applied to the EI channel this March as well. So there's a lot of time for that. As far as specific questions for the investments themselves, I would definitely suggest talking to your investment professional in regards to that. When it comes to individual sectors, oil and gas, they're definitely in a hard position right now. In a way, it's almost a perfect storm. The government shut our economy down over COVID, and at a high level, I would end up saying that Russia and Saudi Arabia and the like decided to pick a fight over oil at probably the worst time. So, as I said, I would suggest best to talk to your investment professional as far as the last one.
Okay, thanks so much, Kevin. Now, here's a question for Sheila. On your resume, how is the best way to add keywords so it passes the software validation and reaches the HR hands?
Sure. That will embed them into results. So look at what the keywords are for the job description itself, and ensure that those words, those very select words, it's typically things like job title, it can be specific software, results, experiences. So by nature of doing a proper resume, you will actually have the proper keywords in your resume. So very easy if you're just talking about results.
Sounds good. And let's see. I think you might have touched on this already, Kevin, but I'm going to circle back to you again. Is this a good time to be putting more money into RRSPs since it's a bear market, if you have enough money to do so?
Well, one of the things I am talking to my clients about is if there is liquidity, there's definitely some very attractive valuations in many different sectors and many different stocks and investments out there. I wouldn't suggest doing it all at once. I would suggest setting up a plan and averaging into some of your investments of choice, say, over the next 3 or 4 months, and try to drive the best average price over that time. We're not out of the woods yet, I don't feel at all. I think we're probably going to see a lot more volatility over the next while, especially if there's a potential second wave of COVID. You know, there's too many variables out there. So take your time, do your research on good businesses that have good, strong cash flow, that have good resources, and should be able to weather the markets themselves for an extended period of time. And as I say, you know, over time, average in, get some of those valuations, and hopefully we'll see some better times. You might have to be patient, though, to see those results over the next 3 to 5 years. But again, yes, there are some definitely good opportunities.
Great. Thanks again, Kevin. And I think we have about 2 minutes left. So here's a question I'm just going to throw out to the entire panel. With so much uncertainty around government programs, the conditions and restrictions, etc., how is it that large companies like Air Canada and WestJet are able to take advantage and rehire virtually all the employees they laid off? Anyone want to tackle that one?
I'll tackle that one. That was an interesting one, right? Because in the first version of the 75% wage subsidy, they wouldn't be eligible if they rehired. Because really, what are they going to do with these employees? They're not going to be flying. They're not going to be working. They're actually going to be paid to stay home effectively. And so this was obviously something happened behind the scenes to get this to be able to happen. And that was announced yesterday as a result of a change. And the change was that the government would refund the employer portion of CPP, EI, and then some other various provincial pension plan contributions to the extent that they met those conditions, which is they hire them back, but they're actually not working. Not 100% convinced I understand the policy of that. I like the fact that they're able to, be employed, but they're really not employed. So it's basically a shift from EI to a subsidy. And so I'm not exactly sure what is better for the country or for the government in terms of cash flow, but ultimately, I think the short answer to the question that the person asked would be, obviously there are some negotiations going on behind the scenes.
Right. Yeah. And so on that note, we are at the hour and a half point. Thank you so much to everyone, to the attendees, to the panelists. We have some Starbucks cards to send out and also a couple of books to send out as well. I hope everybody found value in this, and certainly some of the themes that stuck out for me is that there's more about staying well than just avoiding COVID these days. So keep in mind, stay healthy in all aspects of your life, both mentally and physically. Be skeptical of some of the information that's being circulated around there in the media, and reach out to some trusted advisors to get the information that you can trust. And as Sheila was mentioning, be bold, be creative, and there still are lots of opportunities out there. We don't want to sugarcoat our short-term situation, but long-term, keep looking for those fresh opportunities. And any parting words from you, Cash?
No, I just want to thank everybody for joining. I thought this was great. I want to thank all the panelists for joining us today. I think I hope we added some value, and that there's some great takeaways. And stay safe, everybody. And it's just a matter of time for us to get out of this. This isn't a permanent situation.
I'm just going to add a little bit to it. Sorry for just jumping in, but I just wanted to say that we have recorded this webinar and we will be posting that online. Any questions that haven't been answered and all the ones that have been answered as well, we will be posting online as well. And the third item is there is a survey at the end of this webinar. It's very short, like 3 questions, I think. It will take you maybe 2 minutes, but it will ask questions whether you do want to have more information or contact any of the panelists and so forth. So please take the time to take a look at that and answer those when you can.
Thank you for that, Dorota. That's very important information. It's all recorded, and we'll be getting some more details out to everybody who registered as to how you can get your copy of the recording. Thanks, everybody.
Lovely. Thank you.
Have a
Thanks,
great
everybody.
day.
Stay safe.
Talk to you all
Bye.
soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.